I thank you for being here. It was back in early October of 2001, one of the greatest military actions, most successful in American history, because we had about 300 special ops that were embedded with allies in Afghanistan, at that time called the Northern Alliance. And these were tribal groups in Afghanistan that hated the Taliban. They didn't see them as indigenous to Afghanistan. They were mainly from Pakistan. And they were tyrants. They were murderers. And America, Bush administration, had figured out that the Taliban was behind the attack on 9/11. So we embedded maybe 300 or so special ops. We helped by providing weapons, and we gave aerial support to the Northern Alliance. These are Afghans who are our friends who had an enemy called the Taliban. And by December, the Taliban had pretty well been defeated, but by the end of February, there was no organized Taliban. What was left, those that had not been killed, fled to Pakistan. And then I'm told that there was an advisor, a Pashtun from Afghanistan, an American citizen, who was advising them to give them a strong centralized government and let the president appoint all the governors, mayors, police chiefs. For a decade or so, some of us have met with those allies that fought with us, that fought for us, that lost family, lost loved ones in defeating the Taliban. They are still willing and ready and able to fight, but after the Taliban was defeated, all of their weapons were taken back. And now the country is full of weapons, and this administration seems perfectly satisfied to let the Taliban have all the weapons. We've gotten requests from some of those allies, still ready, able, willing to fight for us, for their country. They have been telling us for a decade or so, look, we know you can't stay forever, but when you leave, please leave us some weapons and allow us to elect our own governors and mayors, pick our own police chiefs, so that maybe the Taliban takes over one province or two, but we can rally again as we did before, and we can defeat them. This administration is following the advice that was given by Mr. Khalilzad back years ago. I've heard some Afghans refer to him, their reference, but as an American Taliban. But he's been negotiating with the Taliban through different administrations. And the key was not to leave weapons with the Taliban so Americans will someday be killed in another 9/11, thousands more maybe this time, but was to leave weapons in the hands of our allies. This administration has horribly bungled the leaving of Afghanistan. It was fine to leave, we needed to leave, but we needed to empower our friends, our allies, the people that the Afghan people wanted to be governing, not the Taliban. I have a letter here from he was the first vice president. He's now, under the Constitution of Afghanistan, the caretaker president, Amrullah Saleh. I've met with caretaker President Saleh over the years, multiple times. Here's what the message he has for America. My dear friends, let me share the thoughts and concerns of 36 million Afghans, specifically women, who lost their hard-earned achievements to Pakistan and its proxies. I'm not going to talk about why we got to this point, rather leave it to history to judge, but all of you know my position about Taliban and peace talks from the first day. If you don't know, our allies within Afghanistan were saying, no, help us, don't help the Taliban. Nonetheless, that has been this administration's strategy. He says Taliban's wish to seize power with force. They impose themselves on people of Afghanistan, and their act of change, which is managed by Pakistan, is a facade. They house arrested Afghan leaders in Kabul and trying to get internal legitimacy through political intimidation. If the Taliban are the reality of Afghanistan, do not look at Kabul airport, but talk to any Afghan. They will tell you that they want to leave the country and they're not going to work with them. The Taliban, still trying to impose their Stone Age ideology on the people and the way they treat Afghan women, the way they execute Afghan government employees, specifically security forces, the destruction of the historical monument, example, destruction of Ghazni City Door, are their latest barbaric acts. Their relationship with Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups are stronger than ever. They celebrate their victory together, and their members drive freely around cities. The only visible difference between 2001 and 2021 Taliban is that they are more extreme, portray hatred in international media, and use the platform to promote extremism and show support for all other Islamic terrorist organizations and extremists. Together with Ahmad Massoud and leaders and commanders of resistance in Panjshir, we present the last front of our Afghan and Western credibility, representing 36 million Afghans who are living once again under the tyranny and Islamic dictatorship. Our political agenda is the demand of every Afghan and the content of peace negotiations which we carried on uselessly in the last 2 years. Afghan people will participate in a process which seeks legitimacy from society, and Taliban should agree on referendum, Loya Jirga, Grand Assembly, and election. We call on international community to help us. However, on the short term, in order to defend Panjshir and mitigate to some degree consequences of the U.S. NATO pullout, providing critical supplies like food, fuel, humanitarian assistance is of vital importance. As we see today, Taliban have cut critical supplies to Baghlan, which has caused thousands of its residents to flee to Panjshir to seek safe haven and away from their brutal rule. Rejecting Taliban without having an internationally acceptable government, we ask you to continue to deal with Panjshir as a de facto seat of power and help us to present Afghanistan in the coming UN General Assembly in 2021. We are the last hope of 36 million Afghans and remaining of 70,000 Afghan security forces and thousands of U.S. and other allies' sacrifices. Our struggle is not for continuation of war, but for bringing a just and durable peace. We can achieve this goal with far less cost, but with determination. History will judge on our deeds, and together we can change the course of history today. And that's signed by the caretaker president, Amrullah Saleh. And it needs to be understood, he's not advocating leaving American soldiers there. President Trump had the right idea, but you don't abandon the country to the enemy that is ever as fierce as they were in 2001. You don't abandon the thousands and thousands of weapons to your enemy that still says publicly they're going to destroy the United States. Our oath as members of Congress And the oath of the retired general here has always been to this country. That's our concern. But our country is best served if we would take airlift, take those weapons that are there at the airport, airlift to Panjshir, give our allies, not the terrorists, but our allies in Afghanistan, a fighting chance to help us. That's what I would ask. We are honored to have a founding member of the 1st Delta Force. It was part of basically every special op from that time in the late 70s until his retirement. And he's now with the Family Research Council. But for comments, somebody that's been there, somebody that's fought there, somebody that understands Afghanistan, I would ask General Jerry Boykin to speak to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Boykin. I spent 36 and a half years in the United States Army, most of which was in special operations. I was a founding member of the Delta Force. In 1978, our mission was to rescue hostages. Our mission was basically to do what's needed today in Afghanistan. 2 years later, we ran an operation in Iran to rescue 52 American hostages. That operation failed, and as a result of that and the study that followed it, SEAL Team 6 was created with the same mission, to rescue hostages. The same thing that's needed in Afghanistan today. And then in 2003, Donald Rumsfeld was the Secretary of Defense. He directed the Marine Corps to create a Marine Special Operations Command, MARSOC, with the same mission, to rescue hostages. We have capabilities to do what's needed to do today. As I watched the news conference the other day with the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and they said, we don't have the resources we need. And I'm left wondering, do you have any influence with the President? You should. You're supposed to. Your mission, by statute, is to provide the best military advice to the Commander-in-Chief. You don't command anything, but you provide advice to the Commander-in-Chief, and if you provided him with the advice that you needed to get these forces rounded up and boots on the ground in Afghanistan, ready to do exactly what's needed today, you couldn't convince him of that, I'm not sure that you're effective as a Secretary of Defense or the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. You should be in there pounding on his desk, because that's what is needed. And routinely, every time the question is asked, will we go into the interior, will we go into the city and rescue those Americans that need to be rescued, the answer comes back to something like, well, they're not being impeded. They're not being impeded from getting to the airfield. Really? Well, why aren't they there? Why aren't they at the airfield? If they're not being impeded, why aren't they there? They want to get out. You're hearing from them every day. And what are they telling you? Yeah, they're being impeded. Absolutely being impeded. Now is the time that we remind ourselves of a long-standing, not just military, but American ethos. And that ethos is, we will never leave anyone behind. We are still searching for the bodies, the remains in Korea from the Korean War. It is time for our president to make the right decision, marshal these forces that are trained and capable of doing this, and go in there and bring our Americans out. That's what they would expect. It's what I would expect if I was caught behind the lines of the Taliban. So, Mr. President, I ask you, as a soldier, with a deep passion for what's happening, I ask you, go get our Americans and bring them home, and bring them home alive.
Well, I'm Randy Weber of Texas, and I want to thank Louie for organizing this and General Boykin for his comments. I couldn't agree more. The abhorrent situation unfolding in Afghanistan is a catastrophic failure of the current administration. This debacle is a direct result of President Biden's failure to lead. Unless he's channeling his former bosses and mentor, President Barack Obama's strategy, who was to lead from behind, he needs to take a page out of the general's playbook and work hard to get our people home. Ask any battle-tested soldier. There's no such thing as leading from behind. The term for that is called abdication. Abdication of responsibility. Mr. President, you have a responsibility to protect Americans. That's your first responsibility as Commander-in-Chief. Please don't lead from behind. You tell the Taliban when we're leaving. You tell them what the requirements are going to be. If they harm one hair on one head of Americans or our soldiers, we're going to come out to the cities, the highways, and the byways. We're going to get those Americans, our soldiers are. If Taliban harms one person, there will be repercussion like they didn't see, the world hasn't seen, called shock and awe in the first Gulf War. Tell the Taliban that, Mr. President. Get some guts and do that. By our own State Department's best estimate, thousands of Americans remain trapped in Afghanistan. Unimpeded, as General pointed out, they are impeded. Our soldiers should go out there and get them. There's no clear plan of evacuation with this administration for those Americans. No clear plan, other than get yourself to the airport. Maybe the president thinks Uber and Lyft will help them. It's ridiculous what he's doing. Of course, he says, we can't guarantee your safety en route to the airport. Get yourself to the airport, but we can't guarantee your safety. Just do the best you can. Mr. President, you tell Taliban you're going to guarantee their safety. If they harm one hair on one head, there will be severe immediate repercussions. Make it clear, Mr. President. Do your job. At the same time that Americans and our Afghan allies scramble for a way out, the President's press secretary, Jen Psaki, has the nerve to tell the American people that Americans are not stranded in Afghanistan. Really? Really? I wonder if Ms. Psaki would go over there and hire an Uber or a Lyft maybe to go get some of those folks. I guess it's like the old saying. She thinks, what are you going to believe? Me or your own lying eyes? It's ridiculous. British and French troops immediately deployed to rescue their citizens, but President Biden has not authorized our military to do the same. What's wrong with that picture? Instead, he kowtows to the Taliban as they use their own weapons and are going to use our own weapons, as the general pointed out, or Louie pointed out, to hunt down American allies, kill innocents, and then continue to install their barbaric regimes. We have a saying in Texas, a leopard never changes its spots. Do we really expect the Taliban to play nice now? Come on, Mr. President, wake up. This international embarrassment has left the door wide open for our adversaries to protect their strength across the globe. China and Russia are laughing at us, and all the while our allies are losing faith in us. Now let me be clear. This failure lies squarely with the Commander-in-Chief, not the brave men and women of our military.
Right.
After nearly 20 years of fighting in our nation's longest war, I agree that it's time to bring our soldiers home. However, to leave irresponsibly, literally in the middle of the night, stranding, yes, stranding, Americans, leaving weapons, vehicles, and sensitive equipment to the Taliban, it is an utter disgrace and a failure to lead. As the situation deteriorates in Afghanistan, Biden timidly seeks permission from the Taliban for U.S. forces to leave after the already arbitrary departure date of August 31st. Let me just add, I know it's a calendar date that's a little questionable, after August 31st, but August 32nd, all hell's gonna break loose, AKA September 1. Trust me, Mr. President, which is just literally 1 week from today. 1 week. Why are we negotiating with terrorists? Don't you know you can't negotiate with killers and those people who want to destroy us? Why negotiate with a ruthless enemy that mercilessly kills civilians, forces young girls into virtual bondage, and foments Islamic terrorism? Why, Mr. President? Why? America is stronger than that. America is better than that. And America needs to lead like that. Instead of negotiating with terrorists, the Biden administration must remind the Taliban, we will leave, but we will leave on our own timeline, when our citizens and our allies have been granted safe passageway away from that murderous regime. The Taliban would be wise not to test the mettle of our military and the resolve of Americans. As American forces leave voluntarily, the Taliban would be wise to not get in their way. We should never let the enemy know our plans. But Biden did. We should never leave Americans in a hostile country to be taken hostage by extremists. But Biden did. We should never, ever abdicate to our enemy. But Biden did. Every president should put America first. Sadly, Biden won't. Louie, I yield back.
First, I'd like to say thank you to General Boykin. What an honor it was to hear him speak. I only wish that we had men like him, men of courage, making the decisions on behalf of our country and our military right now. After our briefing that we just had, I am appalled at what I heard from Secretary Blinken, General Lloyd Austin, General Milley, who don't even say the same things and are saying different things from the administration, from Joe Biden, and who's silent, Kamala Harris. I really wish that we had that type of America first, no man left behind leadership in this crisis that Joe Biden has created as commander-in-chief. He's no commander-in-chief. That is why I've introduced articles of impeachment on Joe Biden for dereliction of duty. He knew, they all knew there was information that was at hand that they knew. They changed the plan for pulling out the troops of Afghanistan, and now tens of thousands of Americans are left in a hostage crisis under the Taliban, who are rapidly implementing Sharia law. That is a very unstable country right now, and at any time, people could be killed if they aren't already being killed. Now here's what you have to do as members of the press. It is your duty to ask for information. We cannot share with you the classified information that we just heard, but it is your duty as members of the press to find the information, do everything you can to reveal it to Americans, because America has been disgraced. I feel so sorry, my heart bleeds for the members of the military who have been dishonored this way. For nearly 20 years, we have lost thousands of lives, limbs. How many families have been affected by this war over in the Middle East? I am completely supportive of pulling out our American troops, but not like this. Not leaving thousands of Americans and then rapidly putting Afghans first without a real good vetting process. This is a tremendous crisis that many of us will pay for, and we will be talking about for a very long time. Shame on the Biden administration. Shame on those in charge that did this to our country, that did this to America, that did this to our military and Americans who are trapped in Afghanistan. How many checkpoints does the Taliban have for Americans to try to get through, to get to the Kabul airport? Ask those questions. Ask what ISIS is doing there. Ask those questions. Do you think they're going to be fair to Americans after the 31st, the deadline when American troops are supposed to be out? I don't think we can trust the Taliban. Are they going to be kind to women? No, they're not going to be kind to women. This is a country where people are, we're all worried about masks. Well, over in Afghanistan, women have to mask up all over their bodies. They can't even walk out publicly with men. They can't receive an education now that the Taliban will be in charge like men do. They will not be treated equally and will not be able to have the successes that they have had. This is what Joe Biden has done. Rapidly pulling out. If Democrats want to say they care about women, they should care about how American women are being treated right now under the Taliban and the radical Sharia law that they are rapidly implementing. And then for Nancy Pelosi to call Congress back out of session when we're supposed to be at home, working in our districts, doing very important work for our constituents, calling us back to vote on her legacy bill, the Green New Deal, that our full focus of Congress should be on Americans trapped in Afghanistan, not fighting over bills and them trying to figure out every trick in the book they have to push their moderate Democrats into voting for something they don't want to vote for just to appease the communist policy that they are setting up. The Green New Deal is going to fail America in the same way Joe Biden has failed Americans trapped in Afghanistan. We must do better. We need leadership that is going to work hard for Americans, every single American, for our borders, for our tax dollars, because these people up here have been here for decades, and look at where it has gotten us. Nearly $30 trillion in debt. Countless lives lost in the Middle East. We're losing our energy independence, and we're going to be forced to rely on China for our energy needs. There is no excuse for that. That is failed leadership, and it's time to make a change. We need people that will care about our hard-earned tax dollars. We need people in charge that will care about our children's future. We need people in charge that would never, ever leave Americans behind, like Joe Biden's administration has done. And that is what Republicans look to do. We look to provide that leadership. We look to provide that stability for Americans. Not just people that vote for us, but every single American of every single identity. It should be America first, always. That's number one. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
I'm Andrew Clyde from Georgia's 9th Congressional District. The situation in Afghanistan is an unmitigated disaster, and it was completely avoidable. Proper leadership, in fact, even mediocre leadership, would have resulted in a better transition. But we are seeing a complete abdication of leadership. The exit didn't have to end this way, but it is a testament to the words of Barack Obama when he said about Joe Biden, "Don't underestimate," and I quote, "don't underestimate the ability of Joe to blank things up." That's where we are, and it's a disgrace. It's shameful to all the veterans whose service has protected our freedoms, but especially to those who served in Afghanistan or supported those efforts during the last 20 years. You know, we haven't had a terrorist attack in the last 20 years. Our military has done a phenomenal job of protecting our nation. But our civilian leadership has failed us. So I'm calling on Secretary of State Blinken to resign. I'm calling on Secretary of Defense Austin to resign. And also the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, to resign. Do the honorable thing and admit that your leadership has failed and it is time to step down. You should have seen this coming. The intelligence was there to show you. If you could not understand it, then you're already incompetent for the job. But if you chose to ignore it, then you're culpable and directly responsible, along with President Biden, to the nation for this humiliating defeat. To the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, if through your years of military experience, and both of them have many, they're both generals, if you saw this coming and tried to persuade the President to not withdraw in this way, but he refused your wise counsel, then you should have done the honorable thing and resigned, signaling to the nation that grave problems are ahead. I believe we are on the brink of another Tehran hostage crisis, but on a much more massive scale. It would not surprise me that on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, the Taliban celebrate their victory over America by parading out those who have been left behind and would become pawns of the Taliban power play. Everyone from President Biden to VP Harris to Secretary Blinken to SecDef Austin keep parroting the phrase, "We will get every American out who wants to get out." But Secretary Blinken has not given us the number because I believe he doesn't know. So my question is, how do you know? How many Americans are still there? And how many have been unable to communicate their desire to get out? How many have been captured already by the Taliban? How many are in isolation? We don't know. This is another example of failed leadership by the top of the State Department. As a veteran who has served 3 combat tours in Iraq and Kuwait, one of which supported operations in Afghanistan, to tuck tail and run and give the country of Afghanistan over to the Taliban will spell danger for our homeland. We have lost our human intelligence capability there, both on the ground. You know, they said we're going to depend on over-the-horizon intelligence. What is that? That just doesn't equate to human intelligence on the ground. But now both ISIS and Al-Qaeda have a safe space to strengthen their operations. We have a wide open southern border and hundreds of thousands cross it every month. Wake up, America. We are now, in my opinion, in more grave danger than we have been in my entire lifetime. And now, I give it to my friend from Virginia, Bob Good.
Thank you, Congressman Clyde. Thank you, Congressman Gohmert, for leading us in this effort. And thank you to our hero, Jerry Boykin, for his remarks today. By the way, you've witnessed the left once more trying to disrupt the press conference. Tell me one example one time when the right tried to disrupt the press conference so you couldn't hear what the left had to say. It's only ever one-sided. You know, regarding the subject at hand, it's no surprise that an administration that is so confused and befuddled about the purpose of our military would also be confused and befuddled about the consequence of their actions and their decisions related to the Afghan withdrawal. This Biden administration has attacked our own military as racist Trump nationalists, and they're trying to indoctrinate our military with anti-American CRT philosophy. This Biden administration has told our military that climate change is the greatest threat to the country, despite the threats like what we're witnessing play out today in Afghanistan. This Biden administration is forcing our military to get the CCP virus vaccination and threatening them with dishonorable discharge if they don't succumb to that mandate. This Biden administration has mandatory sensitivity training on gender identity, but they don't know how many Americans need to be evacuated from Afghanistan. They won't tell us that. I'll bet you with the troops they've sent over, we've now got twice as many troops as we had before the crisis began. I'll bet they know exactly how many numbers based on gender, exactly how many numbers based on race, exactly how many are transgender, because they think that's what the military's about, a social experiment, but they don't know how many Americans need to be evacuated. Can you imagine if we lost all of the patriotic, conservative, Trump-supporting Americans out of our military, how depleted we would be and how diminished our ability would be to defend our country? And you wonder about this administration, like with so many other things, are they confused or incompetent in that regard, or is that really what they want, a diminished ability to defend our country? After 47 years in public office, President Biden should know the elementary principles such as evacuating all American citizens before you pull the military out, secure our weapons and our assets, remove those first so they can't be used against you by the enemy. We need answers. How many weapons has this administration supplied the Taliban that are now being used against us? Will we stay as long as we need to ensure that every American is evacuated safely? And how are we properly vetting the Afghanis that we're bringing out? I have zero confidence in the interest or ability of this administration to properly vet the Afghanistanis who are being removed when they won't do that at our own southern border. What will they do about the thousands of prisoners who've been released in Afghanistan as a result of our haphazard, poorly planned withdrawal? That we've lowered the standard for vetting those we're removing from Afghanistan beneath that which we're supposed to enforce but don't at our very own southern border. This is another example of Biden's America Last policy. President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, Secretary of Defense Austin, and Chairman Milley should all resign, and I call for that today. I turn it back to Louie Gohmert.
This is so reminiscent of what happened. I was stationed at Fort Benning at the time when President Carter welcomed back to, well, he forced out our ally and welcomed the Ayatollah Khomeini as a man of peace. And then when they took our American hostages, instead of just going in and cleaning up, which we were capable of doing, he negotiates with his people and just begs them, please let our people go. We're hearing that. You know, this administration is begging the Taliban when just exactly as my colleagues have said, the answer is to say to the Taliban, as President Trump did, you harm American citizens, we're going to do tremendous harm to you. We're quite capable. We've done that with aerial support. It can be done again. But in the meantime, we don't need American soldiers once all the Americans are out to stay in Afghanistan. We just need to arm our allies instead of doing like the Carter administration did, the Obama administration did, and now the Biden administration is doing, arming our enemies to come hit us again. I'll be glad to take any questions. Yes.
As one who went into Iran during the hostage crisis and Iraq under Saddam Hussein, it's deja vu. And there's a view that this is not by accident, but the Biden family has a debt to China, and the whole purpose behind it, like the border crisis, is not accidental, but is a purposeful following of what China has requested them to do. And second, are you aware that there are demonstrations taking place throughout Afghanistan,
Yes.
and they're very strongly requesting not to give up on them, because the Northern Alliance is there, and after 20 years of freedom, the people are not going to let this go so easily.
Right. They're not taking it lightly in Afghanistan. They are not giving up. I've heard people in this administration say, well, if they can't defend themselves, well, it's just too bad. No, you've taken weapons and left them with their enemies instead of empowering the people that can keep Afghanistan free and eliminate the Taliban. They've done it before with our weapons and with our air support, and not a single American was lost during that time. So we can do it again, but for heaven's sake, we can't keep pleading with the people that killed nearly 3,000 people on 9/11 on the 20th anniversary. This president, this administration is giving such a boost to all of America's enemies by letting the Taliban take over. The Afghan people are not going to lay down. They are going to fight. They like their freedom. But with President Biden giving the weapons to the Taliban, leaving them to them, disaster will follow. We will get hit again on our own soil. So I am pleading on behalf of America and on behalf of our allies who want to fight and defeat the Taliban again, give our allies in Afghanistan the weapons to fight, and don't leave them with the Taliban. Blow the Taliban's weapons up if you have to. Stop negotiating with terrorists. It used to be the American philosophy, we don't negotiate with terrorists. And that's all this administration wants to do. So we thank you for coming out, and I hope and literally pray that this administration will do more than they have to help our friends and stop helping our enemies. And what we did hear from General Boykin, I was told at Fort Benning, be anxious to hear from the military, but that the Carter administration made them scale back from 12 choppers going in to 8. They had to have 6 to accomplish the mission. The military said, look, these are turbine engines going across 500 miles of sand. Give us what we need. And the administration said go in with 8. They got to the staging area with 5, automatic abort. The lesson is, you give our military what they need to do the job. You give our military what they need to get the American citizens out. You blow the Taliban to smithereens if they do not allow the Americans out, and then give the rest of the weapons to our allies. Thank y'all for coming today.
Support Biden. Boom. Yeah, but you're not.